This video is sponsored by Boomslank. Boomslank sells apparels, prints, and phone cases adorned with incredibly detailed and original anime artwork that you'll be proud to wear and show off. Use the coupon code BacklogBattle15 and get 15% off on your purchase at boomslank.com. What's up everyone? Alex here. I must admit that it's been a long time since I seriously dug into a fighting game. And by that, I mean picking a main, knowing the matchups, practicing B&B combos, and generally getting good. So why, pray tell, am I reviewing Granblue Fantasy Versus? As it turns out, this fighting game, much like Arc System Works' work on Persona 4 Arena and Ultimax before it, is based on a popular free-to-play turn-based RPG that I'd never heard of. Naturally, as someone who's always keen on learning and discovering new things, I dove right in, playing, researching, and absorbing as much Granblue Fantasy as I could prior to making this review. The result? Backlog Battle's first ever review of a fighting game, Granblue Fantasy Versus. Granblue Fantasy Versus is a traditional 2D fighting game, co-developed by Arc System Works and Cygames. It's because of this that Granblue Fantasy Versus is an authentic Granblue Fantasy experience, managing to not only honor how the original game plays, but also successfully blending it with Arc System Works' fun and meticulous fighting game design. The game features characters from the long-running free-to-play mobile RPG, and offers a season pass to extend its roster. Given that there's a considerable amount of depth and choice in Granblue Fantasy Versus gameplay, I'll be quick to admit that I won't be able to offer detailed system and character breakdowns that hardcore fans of the genre will want to hear. However, given that the game's design has a lot of unique built-in features, such as a full-fledged RPG mode and expanded simplified inputs, I will be focusing my review to talk about these features in greater detail, while lightly touching upon its various other parts. Looking through Arc System Works' library of incredible fighting games, Granblue Fantasy Versus feels as though it's deliberately slowed the pace of combat compared to the developer's more recent releases. However, longtime fans of fighting games know that slowing down the pace of combat doesn't necessarily equate to easy wins. Granblue Fantasy Versus also contains some now standard Arc System Works gameplay features, such as clashing and just guards. But the speed of combat and the inclusion of these familiar elements aren't the only things that make Granblue Fantasy Versus' system unique. For starters, every character's special moves are represented as cooldown meters reminiscent of modern MMOs. The more powerful the attack button you use to execute said move, the longer you'll have to wait until that special move becomes available. This creates situations where you or your opponent may have fewer tools to use to retaliate or defend themselves. For example, if your opponent misses or whiffs an anti-air special move using their most powerful attack, they'll have fewer options to protect themselves from jump-in attacks because this move will be on cooldown. In addition to 3 different attack button strengths, each character also has a unique move that you can activate using the X button, and, an interesting addition, a dedicated block button in R2. Now, you can also block attacks by holding back or back down on your joystick or D-pad, but having a dedicated block button can help newcomers feel a bit more confident as they focus on learning how to properly defend, counter, and punish their opponents. If you don't play fighting games often, or at all, Granblue Fantasy Versus offers a plethora of options that displaces the game's more technical execution requirements into a simple button press or two. For example, auto combos can be executed through the repeated pressing of the square, triangle, or circle buttons, executing a 3-hit combo as a result. From there, executing a special move to follow it up can simply be done by pressing the R1 button at the end of the combo. In order to provide more specificity, you can either press the forward, back, or down direction when pressing R1 to control what special attack executes. Speaking as someone more used to the technical execution of fighting games, and who had a certain amount of pride in my dexterity, this provided a daunting challenge, especially with my aging reflexes. Muscle memory has its own way of taking over, and choosing between 2 different ways of executing special moves often left me with decision paralysis mid-battle. Nevertheless, it's great that the option is there for everyone else. Perhaps the biggest advertised feature of Granblue Fantasy Versus is its RPG mode, which comes with an all-original story that takes players through a variety of locales, engaging in skirmishes with enemies of all types, along with screen-filling boss battles. The story is told through a series of quests, with dialogue presented in a visual novel-inspired format, fully voiced in both English and Japanese. Most of the English voice cast are comprised of the same actors and actresses who voiced the characters in the anime, along with newcomers whose characters were never voiced before. What's so interesting about how I describe this is that, save for the voice acting, Granblue Fantasy Versus RPG mode is an authentic Granblue Fantasy experience, almost mirroring how the original game is played and presented. In fact, RPG mode's weapon grid system is lifted almost entirely from the original game. Each grid has a slot for the main weapon you'd like to use, which determines the kind of skills that'll be active and what elemental affinity your character's attacks will be dishing out. To improve your character's HP and attack, you can equip additional weapons onto the weapon grid, and its HP and attack bonuses will be totaled and added to your current character stats. Each weapon has different rarities, designated from N for normal to SSR or specially super rare, with the latter offering more powerful skills and stats. You power up your weapons by spending in-game currency, to which you'll eventually hit its level cap. In order to get past this, you will need to have a weapon of the same type and rarity to consume. This then leads to some interesting quandaries. Should you spend your resources to max out a SSR weapon with high stats, knowing that finding another weapon to break its level cap might take a while? Or will you play it safe and invest resources on more common weapons? You'll find weapons in the game as either quest rewards or as random rewards when redeeming tickets a la loot boxes, a reference to the original game's gacha mechanics. The battles in RPG mode play like side-scrolling brawlers, blended with the game's fighting engine, and the skills you've learned playing your characters in other modes translate well here. One major difference is that pressing the back direction immediately faces your character in the opposite direction. This means that executing special moves via the R1 button is a highly preferred way of doling out special moves while playing in this mode. Later in the story, you'll be able to play alongside the AI or a player-controlled character, whether via online or locally, and is a fairly entertaining way to go through the story with a friend or a loved one. While RPG mode is one of the more entertaining fighting game modes I've played in recent memory, the loading screens that break up the action and the management of your weapons and characters leave something to be desired. Loading up a quest can take up a good bit of time, often preceded by flavor text, followed immediately by a black screen with more loading. This isn't made any better by the fact that some of these quests have 2 to 3 quote-unquote different locales that also require a good amount of loading in between. I say different in quotes, because most of the time, the new locale utilizes the exact same background, with maybe a revised rule or two, and a few new enemies. What winds up happening then is that you experience small bits of gameplay in between story sections of various lengths, punctuated by chunky portions of loading. It's because of this that the RPG mode's pacing is affected greatly, and instead of feeling like you're making meaningful progress, you feel as though you're mostly waiting for the game to allow you to interact with it. I recognize that there's a necessity to build this game mode around the core of Granblue Fantasy Versus, that being its fighting game engine, but ultimately, the player experience in RPG mode is compromised as a result. It's unfortunate, because I feel that RPG mode is in fact a worthwhile distraction and a unique game mode that gives people a taste of the original game. While the story of RPG mode does take you on a fun romp through familiar locales, it'll only feel that way if you've actually interacted or watched any Granblue Fantasy media. Coming into this game, I had cursory knowledge of who Gran, Vern, Lyria, and Catalina were, but didn't know anything about Rakams or Io. RPG mode's story does very little to endear new players to the cast, and I feel that this is a missed opportunity for Cygames to engage with its new audience. That said, the storyline, strewn across 8 to 10 hours of gameplay, is par for the course for both the anime and the original game, in that it is heavily plot-driven and not so much interested in creating interesting character moments that effectively show the motivations and personality of the cast. Beyond Granblue Fantasy Versus RPG mode, however, is the true heart and soul of any Arc System Works fighter: competition. But despite its best efforts to get new players into a battle quickly and fighting, you might think to yourself that you still need some additional aid. That's where the game's Mission Mode comes in. Mission Mode is a specialized mode that teaches you everything about Granblue Fantasy Versus and fighting games, and has you practically apply these lessons in real time to ensure that you understood them. There's a wide variety of lessons here, ranging from your typical basic tutorials, combo tutorials, to even learning how to punish characters' special moves. Unfortunately, I am in no situation to truly measure whether this mode is successful in its goal. After all, I've been entrenched in the fighting game community and its games since the early 90s, and this prior knowledge muddies my understanding of what new players really need to learn in order to enjoy fighting games. That said, I was really surprised how well the game's roster was integrated into the lessons, and I appreciate the ease in which I can take as much or as little of the lessons as possible. It's also quite appealing to see that even with its most basic lessons, that there are a variety of sub-objectives that players can aim for in addition to the required task. This small change makes learning a lot of fun, and slightly nudges players to learn more of the game's nuances. As is standard for most fighting games, Granblue Fantasy Versus features both ranked and online lobbies for online competition. However, playing matches online doesn't feel all that great. It's at this time that I want to remind everyone that playing anything online before actual copies of the game in that region get released is never an accurate measure of its eventual performance. But given that my experience with its online functionality isn't all that great with so few people playing, I don't see how it's going to improve when the game actually goes live. Disappointing as it is to hear that, yet again, another Arc System Works fighting game doesn't have good netcode, I am thankful that much of the game feels like a solid, worthwhile package. And soon as I started the game, I was immediately drawn into its vibrant, colorful world. It's really breathtaking to see Arc System Works technology in action, rendering 3D characters and environments as though they're traditional 2D cell animation, all with the greatest of ease. This, combined with the incredible amounts of detail that the developers put into the design of every UI element, logo, and artwork, and you'll be quickly inclined to forgive small UI faux pas. What's just as impressive is the lineup of characters that are a part of Granblue Fantasy Versus roster. The game has a mixture of characters that range from the obvious Ryu-type personage in Gran, the diminutive knight in Charlotta, to the ever-lovable and fourth-wall-breaking Lowain. And these character designs, in conjunction with their intro and outro animations and matches, do so much to breathe personality in them, encouraging players to start thinking of who they might want to play as next just by the basis of who they like.
Whoa.
Oi, you gents hear that?
She thinks we have tactics. Well, joke's on her.
I can honestly say that there hasn't been a fighting game roster in a long time that's excited me as much as the roster in Granblue Fantasy Versus, and a part of me wants to spend the time to learn as much of these characters as I can just because the game is so gorgeous to look at. But Granblue Fantasy Versus isn't just a feast for the eyes, but also for the ears as well. Many of the game's compositions are so catchy and rousing that I've listened to the entire soundtrack on loop. I was really surprised how much of its songs transcended the game that it was written for, reminding me of some of the more elaborate and incredible compositions I'm used to hearing from some of the best RPG soundtracks. Given how many of the original game's songs were in fact composed by the legendary Nobuo Uematsu, it shouldn't have been a surprise to me that Granblue Fantasy Versus soundtrack would uphold the established quality of his compositions and properly evoke an epic feeling of adventure. Granblue Fantasy Versus is a game that I didn't think I'd really get into. But after playing for so many hours in its various modes, I found a lot of enjoyment in trying out and experimenting with the different characters that this roster offers. I find that its appeal to me is something that goes well beyond how beautiful it looks and sounds, or even how charming its character roster's designs can be. It reminds me of a time that I spent countless hours mastering combos, learning the many nuances of a fighting game, and really diving deep into combo strings and videos that the community shared with one another. It's a game that makes me want to pick up technically challenging characters to want to try and learn, despite the numerous excuses to myself that my eye-hand coordination isn't as good. If Granblue Fantasy Versus was able to light up that passion I once had for fighting games, what more for anyone curious enough to pick up this game?